and so everything fell onto me, because now the wife is, she's...
All right, gentlemen, we're going to convene this meeting at
So...
6:05.
Moving, I don't know where
Rich,
this kid got all
you-
this
you with me?
furniture from. 2 o'clock in the morning, we're still closed, still moving furniture. It's just unbelievable.
Is that a laptop down there, or is that the real person? You ready? It's a what? Oh, okay.
So is that open? So
I'm calling the meeting to order at 6:05, and confirmation of a quorum. What happened to our secretary? But we have a quorum, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yes, we do. Confirmation of the meeting agenda and order. I don't think we're going to, unless any member would like to change the agenda order or has something to add or subtract. I think items 9 and 10 are kind of redundant, so we'll cover them together. They both talk about requisitions for payment. Our next item is a review and approval of the minutes from the March 10th meeting. I'd entertain a motion that we waive reading and accept these minutes. Motion made. Seconded? Seconded? Anybody have any changes, corrections to the minutes of March 10th? Hearing none. All in favor? Against? Abstentions? The minutes are accepted for March 10th. Our next item is the report from Shawmut regarding the project status and schedule. So we just need kind of a briefing as to where you are and...
Well, currently we're on the bid schedule, pretty close to it to a T. Piles are being driven for the locker wing as we speak. Well, not now, but during the day. We are probably about 75% done with the piles on the east wing. We're going to be looking to finish piles on the east wing on Monday. So pile driving operations will stop for a period of time as we prep to move the building into the parking lot.
What else is going on site except for other than the pile driving?
Everything, all utilities have been disconnected. We did the underground sewer line to the manhole. Site work preparations are complete. Tomorrow we'll be starting to prep for the leveling pad for the building move. You missing anything, Jeff?
We started leveling the building today.
Preliminarily, it did come up a few inches, so, I mean, obviously it's not all the way to the building bearing on it yet, but they did start to try to tighten up some of the steel beams underneath the building.
Not lifting, level.
Leveling.
Right. So that's a significant operation for us because there's been this concern that it's not going to go back the way it was, or would be a problem going back. So what they'll do is they're going to level it before they even attempt to do anything as far as moving is concerned.
Correct.
Correct.
And we had a discussion at the job meeting about whether or not that should be monitored in any way. Kevin, did you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's being monitored by a combination of Jeff and Chris during the day going through with Wolf as they or level the building. I went on in the building tonight because, they do have a way in through the front door still. And Jeff identified a few areas that they were monitoring, such as the curtain wall, so that it doesn't bind up as the floor is being leveled underneath it.
Right.
So,
And all the glass is out of that, right?
Correct.
so in my view, the proper precautions are being taken.
Yeah. Any reaction so far?
It's going really well.
Yeah.
Areas of the floor that we've lifted up, no damage. Areas of the floor that we've lifted up quite a bit, I mean a couple inches, there's been no tile damage. Everything, the clips that are attached to the floor that go into the curtain wall to hold the channels in place actually are sliding pretty much right into where they're supposed to go. We'll be doing that same process that we did on the floor today as we start picking it up and doing more leveling. We'll be monitoring the clips that are attached to the upper roof of the structure, underside of the roof, making sure those line up and go back in. And so far, progress is good, and so far the outlook is very good for stuff going back.
So we don't do any, or there isn't any protocol about releasing things like clips and bolts and framing members that have bolted connections or anything like, we don't relax the building, raise it, and then tighten it up.
No, we don't have elements in the building that are what I call rigidly connected. A lot of very simple connections, things bolted together where there's enough ability to slip in the bolted connection for things to move back to where they need to be. So, I mean, the predominant things that got hung up at this stage are finishes, windows, doors, things that you wouldn't think would short circuit the building being leveled, like, even conduits and
Right.
non-structural stuff can cause it not to come up. So
Right.
but that's why they're keeping an eye on it.
Questions from the committee? So 2 dates would be important for us as we're monitoring this. One would be, when do you think they'll have the building leveled, and then when do you think they're going to move it? You have an idea as to,
Well, currently, they're starting to level the building. That's in progress, and the plan for now is to move the building a week from Monday on the 25th.
so between now and the 25th,
Be
they'll
leveling
be
up.
leveling
Yep,
and
tightening
raising,
the steel.
prepping it.
Leveling and lifting.
So 4/25, so they move it on, they start moving it then?
Tentatively, yes, that's the schedule,
That's
yes.
one-day operation?
It's a one-day operation to move it.
Okay. Any questions from the committee? Anything else we should know from the CM's perspective about the project?
The underground utility work that we did in the parking lot wasn't scheduled this early. We just had an opportunity to get it done quicker and took advantage of it. That's the only thing that's kind of off from what the original bid schedule was, but it's just one sewer line.
You have an open
And the
item,
and the electrical trench is in as well.
you have an open item from the last meeting about the failure of the structural steel subcontractor. What happened there?
The new subcontractor is on board. We have gotten him contracts. He has gotten us a new shop drawing that is, right now, was sent to DeStefano and Chamberlain for his review. Once we get that erection drawing back, piece drawings will be coming in to follow that. And then we're going to get them, 6-week lead time on the galvanized steel, which doesn't hurt our schedule. So we don't really see any impacts schedule-wise for the new steel contractor being on board late in the game.
There's a money issue, where's that?
I'm sorry, what's that, Jim?
There is a money issue, where's that? Where do we stand with that?
I'll let-
Well, again, the All-Phase Steel, who was the low bidder that couldn't do the contract, was terminated. So it's right now, it's in the town's hands as far as where we want to take the additional funds from, whether it's going to be from the owner's contingency or the CM contingency.
Who's, and from the purchasing perspective, who follows up when a contractor fails like that? And actually, the only recourse we have is the bid bond?
Yes. You called on?
No, as far as, for the information that was given to us is that the bid bond was no longer in effect because we had asked them to hold their bid through November, and at that point, once a letter of intent was given, which we did, the bid bond was null and void. So there was no bid bond at that point.
It sounds to me like the first round from the surety saying they don't have any responsibility. I hope the
correct.
town will pursue it.
That's correct. Yep.
That's a knee-jerk reaction from a surety.
I'll check with the CFO and see what he wants to do. It's not a normal circumstance to have the bid, expire before you call the bond.
Right,
So we're just gonna have to see, I guess, what we can do.
right.
I can ask, they did hire a new purchasing director. He should be starting full-time next week. I can see if he has.
Well, let's pursue it. And the other thing is, do we have some kind of assurance that you're going to separately expedite the galvanizing of the structural steel so that we don't end up with late delivery on that?
Yeah, I mean,
Which
at
is
this-
typically the,
Well, at this point, there doesn't seem to be any delay in the galvanizing, so he's
but it would be nice to
quoting
know the
6.
day that it goes to the galvanizer, that you
yeah.
guys get noticed and you're following it.
We do follow that. We'll have that on our procurement log.
So I can write that down.
Yes, sir.
believe I put that in our owner architect contractor meeting minutes as well.
Okay. Any questions from the committee regarding the project? Everybody have an opportunity to drive by it, go see it, trip over it?
Yeah, I gotta see my Tyson in today.
Okay. I'm going to close this item out unless there are any questions. Our next item, agenda item, is a report from Colliers regarding the project budget and the status of the GMP reconciliation.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ben. I work with Chuck Warrington. He apologized he couldn't be here tonight. He would be. He had a few things come up today. I'll pass this down. Okay, just pass this down. We'll go over the project budget. I work with Chuck on a daily basis on Penfield. I'm usually there a few times a week. Chuck and I, we put together this budget block that you're looking at. This is our way of managing and taking a snapshot of what the budget looks like today. Your top row shows the project budget as of February 11th. The transfer there was from the funding from a different source. That's why that's deducted from column C, the first row. As you move over to the right, that's what's been paid. Unpaid is, your status right now is $6,445,000. I apologize for the roundup. It's actually not 7. It's less than that, but the way our software works, it just rounds up. So this top row here will give you a snapshot of where we are at and what's been paid and what's not paid or what's anticipated as the project goes along. The planned but not contracted amount for $1,000, we inputted that this week. That has to do with legal fees that we were presented with this week, which you'll see in the invoice packet as well. If you flip to page 2 and look down at the contingency in row F, those two numbers, 65,300 and 274,900. If you add those together, that's what is reported for contingency. The only reason why we have 65 broken out is because we do have some exposures right now with the steel contractor, and we feel that there may be some exposure possibly down the road when the building gets leveled, in terms of going back and doing any remediation work. If it turns out that we don't, then we back that back out and put it into the additional need line item. If you guys have any questions on that, I can take those before we move on to our general project update.
So, if I might, this is a budget reconciliation separate and apart from the schedule of values.
That's correct. This is based on, so this is just the GMP and the construction budget. These are invoices that have come through and have either been paid or unpaid, but it's simply from where we started, when the construction started, or when the GMP started, to today's date. It's not a reconciliation. That's a separate separate document. This is just something that we keep track of as we go along, so that if you ask Chuck or I, Jim, on a particular day of the month, where do we stand with paid or unpaid versus what the actual GMP amount is, we can provide that for you. Same thing with, as you move down these line items, we have line items for architect, which is Stefano and Chamberlain. So you can analyze this a lot of different ways, but the big line items are the top row and then obviously down at the bottom at contingency.
Any questions from the committee members regarding the budget reconciliation? Okay. What else do you have?
So this is just, we don't really have to go over this very long. Shawmut covered some of this. This is just from, we're on site several times a week. Obviously, we're involved with the OAC meetings. We're involved with reviewing all of the invoices and change orders, which we haven't had any yet. This is just our update of where we stand. Schedule-wise, we agree with Shawmut that they're at least on schedule, if not a little bit ahead of schedule at this point. I won't go through the progress because we've already talked about that. DeStefano and Chamberlain has been on site conducting inspections bi-weekly, if not more, and also monitoring piles. We do not have any unresolved major issues that we know about at the time. There are no change orders or proposed change orders that have come through. And applications for payment, we do have an invoice packet tonight, and we are anticipating Shawmut will submit a pay app to be reviewed prior to the next building committee meeting. We just attached a couple of just macro photos for anybody who hasn't been to the site and wants to take a look at some recent snapshots out there. And I guess the most important part of our agenda item tonight is the GMP reconciliation.
Let me, before you go there, before you go any further on that one, it would be great for us on these meetings if we received this by email the day before, 24 hours in advance. It'd be great.
Sure.
Just for those members who want to go through it. If it's as short and as simple as this, you could certainly present it at the meeting, but any backup or detail in the future, the sooner we get it, the better.
Okay. Yeah,
So-
and hopefully the committee's been receiving our field
Right.
reports, which are obviously more detailed than this. and-
No, this is a good summary. This is what we want to hear at this particular meeting, but I think we've all gotten the summaries.
Okay.
The secretary have copies
Yes.
of this, because she can take minutes.
Yeah, that's a good point. We need to have a half a dozen here, just in case
Yeah, I
anybody...
have plenty of extras for anybody who needs them to pass them on. All right, this is our GMP reconciliation.
Hold it. Any committee members have any questions regarding the summary? Yes.
As far as the unresolved major issues, we're still, the subcommittee is still awaiting some information regarding the $38,000 that is supposedly due for work already done. Right?
Are you referring to the prior to February pre-construction? Yes, Sharma will have to speak more to that because I'm not sure what their intentions are, so I'll defer to you guys.
Well, I think the point is, where's it going to be covered on this agenda tonight? Is it going to be covered in your report now?
We touched upon it briefly. We didn't go into depth on it because, quite frankly, we don't have a PO or an invoice or something substantiating that they received authorization to do that work. So because we don't have a physical purchase order or anything in our hands, it's hard for us to reconcile that because we don't have anything. So our opinion at the time is if somebody could drop a PO in front of us that shows us for that amount prior to February 2015, then we can reconcile that. If that doesn't happen, then Shawmut will have to discuss with the board, obviously, the work that they did. We'll give them the authorization to do so and why they should be paid that amount.
All right, we have two issues then. Apparently, one is for you to go through the document you just handed out, and the second is to address this issue that you just brought up. Why don't we go through the GMP reconciliation first? And that's something you just handed to us
Yeah.
in draft form?
Yeah, you passed that around. So the reason why we labeled this as a draft form was because we realized that Shawmut will want to respond to this and/or sit down to go over this. And the other reason is because we weren't a part of the project at the time that a lot of the pre-construction items were taking place. So we're going based off of information from the GMP and the AIA contracts, from the low bidder proposals, from building committee meeting minutes that we've read through several times, and from the contract drawings and specs. So that being said, if we do have things in here that got worked out verbally or in some other capacity, and there's an answer to that, then we're obviously open to revising this if need be once we get that information. I'll go over some of the highlights in here. I know this is a pretty long document, but we'll go over. The biggest thing that we've found going through this is allowances and alternates in all of the trade packages have not been broken out separately in the schedule of values. So what happened with the GMP was allowances and alternates were lumped in with the trade packages, the low bidder trade packages. And what we want to see in every one of these trade packages, any allowances, we want to break those back out so we can track those. Same with the alternates.
Are we allowed to comment after each one of these?
Yes. Be happy to have you comment.
Right. Do you have anything?
Yeah, we have a complete response to this reconciliation.
So, for instance, with final cleaning, which is the first trade package we have listed on here, as part of the schedule of values and the pay requisition, we'd like to see the actual trade package value be separated from the allowances that were in there. So we have a 96-hour cleaning allowance of $6,672, and then we have a cleaning which is outside of scope of work of $5,000. That was lumped all together into one large number with the final cleaning trade package. We'd like to see those broken out so we can actually track those.
And just my comment on that statement is totally incorrect. If you look at the GMP summary that was approved by both the committee and the town, we have an allowance summary as part of our GMP that breaks those costs out, and we will be monitoring that. There's nothing hitting in a trade bid package. It's in the GMP agreement, in the allowance summary, those two costs.
So I guess the question that Colliers has is how are we going to, if they're not broken out in a schedule of values as a 96-hour cleaning allowance for $6,672,
It's an allowance that if the cleaning is required, that we'll do time and material tickets to bill against the allowance.
I understand.
Signed off.
I understand, but can we separate that from, in a line item,
It is already separated on a line item on the GMP.
in terms of a schedule value and a pay requisition, you're going to break those out for us?
Absolutely.
Okay, that's what we want, that's all
But
we're
it's- but
getting
just, I
at.
wanted to let you know that it is part of the allowance summary sheet of the GMP. It is spelled out there.
We understand that, but when we saw your original schedule of values, they were not broken out, and that was our main concern.
And I think, actually, when we went through this reconciliation, which we don't consider a reconciliation because nobody approached us and asked us for our comments before we saw this, and we could have saved the committee a lot of time and anguish over this document because most of the items in here are inaccurate and not correct at all. The GMP is 100% accurate. We went through each one of these items, and we can easily go through and discuss this. But I don't know what documents you were looking at, but you must not have been looking at the latest documents.
So the documents that we analyzed were the low bid trade packages,
Correct?
the GMP, and then we had to extrapolate several allowances and alternates out of the trade packages because they were interspersed.
No, if you look at the bid form has a breakout, each bid form has a breakout for alternates and allowances, and what allowances were included in each of the trade packages. All allowances were included in the trade bid packages, and then we created an allowance summary sheet and highlighted every one of those allowances. And 6-7 months ago, when we went through the GMP items, we sat with the committee and we went through every one of those allowances in that GMP summary.
And
So-
the allowance summary sheet also says what trade packages those
Right.
allowances
These
are in.
I'm not going to engage in this at the moment, and I don't think...
May I make a
and I don't think the
suggestion, Mr.
committee has-
Chairman?
I don't think, when I'm finished, I don't think the committee has to. I don't remember going through the type of detail on the GMP. However, the nice thing about a construction management agreement and relationship is that we have the opportunity to look at the budget and what's behind the budget and so forth. So the intent here was simply to get Colliers up to speed as far as the numbers are concerned and to reconcile the GMP. It's not an unusual request, and they should do it in concert with you and your office and your numbers. That's what a reconciliation is all about.
Which they did not.
Well,
And
yeah, but
actually,
they-
it's not really normal to do it after a GMP agreement is already in place
well,
and approved by the committee and approved by the town. That is not standard practice.
The GMP bottom line was approved by the town and approved by the committee.
That's correct.
Okay.
So Brian, if you'd like to go over each trade package here, I'm willing to do that with you.
Well,
You
that
could do it from the-
that should have been done before this document was publicized, because it's inaccurate, and it paints the wrong picture to the committee as far as what the
No.
GMP represents.
I think after 2+ years, this committee has a pretty good open mind, and what we want is we want a reconciliation, and that would be agreement on both parties and any disputes brought to the committee. That's
Correct.
typically the way it should be.
Right.
So, and you have been present when the chair has requested that on behalf of the committee, that this GMP reconciliation take place as soon as Colliers got on board. So Colliers came on board late. That's just the way this project has gone. They're here now. This is draft form. I don't think anybody's taking any position as far as committee members are concerned, one way or the other. I think what we need is a reconciliation, and we need that reconciliation offline. We don't need to spend 2.5 hours here tonight.
I agree.
Well, did you
so-
pass out the draft responses? Oh,
Yeah.
Okay, you have a copy of our draft responses. We just-
Yeah, but-
We just want to make sure, for record, that we don't feel that this is a reconciliation document because we were not advised about it. We
Okay.
were not consulted about it or had a chance to even review it and put our responses
Okay,
to it. But-
that's fair. I mean, you have a draft report from Colliers, and you have a draft response here. What we need is both the project management oversight and the CM to get together and by the next meeting, come back. We're willing to settle any misunderstandings or disputes pretty quickly, and I don't imagine they're going to be after you get together. So why don't we just make sure that you spend the time together on it? A lot
Yeah,
of,
we're certainly willing to do that. You know, if you have a response and a draft copy, we're, of course, open to sitting down with you and going through each individual line item.
Very happy to do that.
all right, questions from the committee?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, the assumption is that the next committee, this will all been resolved. My only comment is, if it hasn't been resolved, I think we should know about it before the meeting. I don't want to come in the next meeting and find that there's still differences of opinion. So I think if they can resolve 80 or 90% of this, we should be notified it before the meeting, and those 10 or 15%, whatever they are that hasn't, we should know about it. I agree with you. We shouldn't be sitting here tonight listening to he says, she says.
Yes.
I agree. I think that the two parties should meet. They should resolve whatever differences there may or may not be. Hopefully, there won't be many. And I think it's imperative that the committee is well-informed in advance of the meeting so that we've had an opportunity to go through any items that you don't see eye to eye on, because we want to digest them and come to the next meeting prepared rather than have to sit here and read these now. So I would appreciate advance notice on that.
I
At least several
completely
days
agree. Yeah.
would be great. Thank you.
That said, from my colleague, does that give you enough time, 2 weeks?
Sure does,
That's more than enough time.
Okay,
Yeah.
fine. Then we'll make sure that's an agenda item. Rich, you've been involved in this and listening to it. That's okay with you?
Yeah, that's fine,
Yeah.
yes.
That said, I'm going to close out this part of this particular agenda item. There's something else here that I'm going to bring up that was brought up as we started this. Rich, you made a comment about the reconciliation of costs prior to February. Is that something that, who's looking into that? You in purchasing, Colliers in purchasing? and-
So we have done, it's a really convoluted issue, but we have done a lot of research. And we have been, like I said earlier, we have been trying to find, we've reconciled what's been paid and what hasn't been paid, but we believe that everything that's been paid is substantiated, and this extra cost, we cannot, it doesn't match up with our accounting, and we don't have a PO for it, so it's tough for us to reconcile that. As of now, we don't understand why the town,
Okay,
we need to pay
great.
it,
Got the picture. It's a separate issue. It has to do with billings and so forth. It's purchasing in on this?
Correct. There is a purchase order for it. Colliers has all of the purchase orders to date, including all the invoices. The problem is that date in the GMP, that February 2015 date, that is a question. And it's a combined effort. I think where we left off the last internal meeting was that Shawmut was going to provide us with backup for the difference in costs. We haven't received it yet, so as of right now, we believe we're paid to date in full.
Okay. So this is a separate item, and it has to do with payments made to date, invoices, payments made to date? And who's going to lead that? It's purchasing, it's finance department, Shawmut,
Shawmut.
and Colliers.
Right.
So can we drive that to a conclusion before the next meeting?
That should be no problem either.
All right, so we're going to add that as the second item. Comments from the committee?
Relative to having that before the second meeting, as you're aware, I've been going to the job meetings for the subcommittee's purposes. I would like to, at the next, whenever you have it, let me know so that I can be at that Tuesday meeting.
Sure.
And then we'll get that out of the way as the subcommittee is supposed to perform, if it is indeed rectified.
No problem.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else from Colliers? We have these two outstanding issues, which I know you guys will pursue.
Yep.
Any questions from the committee about Colliers reporting and their progress reports, the services they're providing this committee? Any questions regarding these two issues, which we'll bring back before the committee? Again, one is the paid-to-date reconciliation for Shawmut, and the other is the GMP reconciliation. Questions?
The only thing is a minor issue on the project status report update. If it's not too much trouble, if you could just caption the photos that you insert in there.
Sure.
Just with a, 10-word description or something like that, just so we know.
Andy, what are we posting? We're posting
the Stefano and Chamberlain's project status updates, which include photos, generally.
Yeah.
in there. So,
I
all of
think
them are out
that's-
there so far. The only
It's okay with the committee?
The last three haven't made the news feed yet. It's just I haven't gotten to that step yet, but everything else is up there.
Thank you. Kevin, you're next. It's a report from DeStefano and Chamberlain, project status, anything you want to talk about, and then, of course, obviously, the parking lot presentation.
Okay. Yeah, so since construction started at the beginning of March, we've been out there, personally, I've been out there probably 2 to 3 times a week, just observing the general progress of the work. And now that we're into pile driving, we're doing the special inspections of the pile driving. So that includes having one of my guys out there observing all the piles go in, logging them, determining when they've reached either capacity or minimum embedment or both, and making a call when the pile driving can stop. And also monitoring the seismograph readings of the ground motion on the site, which is a typical precaution taken on pile driving jobs as well as blasting jobs. We've had a few issues with the piles, nothing out of the ordinary. A couple of them have broken, which is not uncommon for timber piles when they're very long and they're sticking up out of the ground as they're being hammered in. Sometimes you will get some breakage from the effects of the treatment process, which tends to make them a little bit brittle. We have hit a few obstructions in the fill that they're driving through, but nothing that they haven't been able to dig out of the way. So I would say all in all, it's going very smoothly. And they have about 2/3 of the piles for the locker wing driven. They're almost where they can't go any farther until the building is moved. The building moving work, as far as the preparation, the placement of the steel under the building and the cribbing, also seems to be going very smoothly. Wolf seems to have a very sharp handle on the work that's involved, and it's the kind of thing we're talking about constantly with Shawmut on site. So I don't have any concerns in that regard. Site work has seemed to be going very smoothly as well, perhaps even ahead of schedule. We've had no issues as far as excavating, filling, utility work. So all in all, the job, in my opinion, has been going very smoothly.
I'm going to ask for questions from the committee. One thing that you just said in the very beginning, and the committee may not be aware of, we had one concerned neighbor about vibration. Was that resolved this afternoon, or what kind of communications have we?
Well, we want to reach out to anybody in the neighborhood who's concerned. I left a message for the individual, and I'm happy to go out and look at the person's house and see if there is any damage. Certainly if the project has caused damage to adjacent property, the project is responsible for that. But normal, ground movement, building shaking is part of the pile driving process.
Is the existence of the seismic monitor considered to be a good or absolute defense?
Well, actually, yeah. I mean, the legal limit for ground motion is actually very generous. It's ground acceleration, and the number, not that this number would necessarily mean anything to anybody, but the number is 2 inches per second squared. We have not seen anything above 0.2 inches per second squared during the course of the work so far. And that one monitor is at the far east end of the lot near the dumpster area, which is the direction that's probably closest to the neighborhood residences if you had to pick which way to go.
Okay.
So I'm not aware of anything we're doing that's above and beyond that's unduly causing stress to adjacent properties. The soils themselves are fairly predictable, fairly common beach area soils. Other than the first few feet of fill that's been placed there, the rest of the soils are fairly soft until we get down to the bearing stratum. So I cannot think of anything else that we could do that would lessen the effect on the neighborhood.
Yes.
So that it's on record, can you share with the committee what the concern was or the complaint was from whoever the neighbor was that registered one?
Well, I don't want to speak for them because I haven't spoken to the person yet, but I think it's something to the effect of they're feeling vibrations in their house, which is not unexpected, that you would feel something. I don't know the level to which this person felt it. When you're in the job trailer on the property, you can feel the ground shake. You can feel the trailer vibrate a little bit. Nothing that's anything out of the ordinary from what I've observed in the probably 20 years I've been on pile driving jobs.
For the benefit of the committee, the emails today, which you may not have seen, are about this phone call or question, and we got it from the town risk manager, and the question was, is there too much vibration, or could there be too much vibration, and so forth. So I asked, on our behalf, I asked Kevin to take over and lead the response, because both Shawmut and Colliers wanted to get right into it in a very positive way, but the problem is, we just want one person representing the project. So, and I think Kevin is the person to do it. The other thing I remember reading somewhere is that we attempted to inspect these houses and nobody took us up on it, or what is
Well,
that?
I just want to confirm that with Shawmut. My understanding was Nora Perrine asked to do pre-pile driving photographing of the neighbors.
Only adjacent to the property structures. And there are no structures adjacent to our property. There's one kitty corner across the road, which is the closest yellow house.
So they didn't ask other property owners if they could photograph their houses. Okay, then I misunderstood.
Okay,
then.
let's make sure we understand that.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
I looked for my email. I must have deleted it by mistake. The person who sent an email out lives considerable distance from the project. It's down on Roland Road, and the complaint was no damage to her house, but she says that her shower doors were vibrating, so I believe, I'll see if I can retrieve the email. In fact, she indicated she was going to come tonight. I'm looking around, I don't see her, but this was considerable distance from the project, for the record.
If I might, this science is pretty well established as to what you should protect, what vibration really is and how far it goes. That's why I asked whether the seismographs were there, because that's considered to be not the end-all defense, but certainly the first legal defense.
Yeah, I mean, the best documentation is if you have a photograph before and after
Right.
of the
Obviously, but
subject.
those houses are not around. They're
But-
far from the property line.
They are pretty far. Yes.
Pile depth and pile location to the point where we're not going to hit with any cost one way or the other, is that going well?
I would say it's going well. I mean, the way the contract is structured, the pile driver is paid for the final installed length that goes in.
So the waste is his?
Yeah, the waste is his. Now, if we have a buried condition that prevents him from getting a pile in and it breaks and he has to drive another one, he would be entitled to charge for that second pile.
Right.
We've had a few of those, but not to the point where it's going to move the needle very much.
Does the budget account for these broken piles, or any of them? Is there any Anything in that line item?
No, I don't believe so. I mean, I think we have a total aggregate lineal footage of 6,000 lineal feet of piles as part of the contract with Norwalk Marine.
Yeah, we base that on a finished length of 25 feet, and we don't have 25 feet, so I think there's probably enough,
Going to be ahead of the game.
yeah, in there that will be okay.
Okay. The other thing, okay, so as far as you're concerned, it's going okay? Going well?
Yes.
Okay. Anything else you want to inform us about before you get into the parking lot?
Did you want to defer talking about FEMA until the next meeting when Joe is here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Unless there's something that's, I mean, if it's the same FEMA discussion, we can wait for Joe. He's the guy who's leading it.
Probably best if we wait for him.
I don't know what the FEMA discussion is. I guess it's what we started with the,
Can we get a preface?
Okay. So when let's see, Joe and Laura were, with Public Works and Engineering, were following up with what was needed to close out one of the grants, that whole subject of the extra foot of elevation that we rejected, that came up. It also triggered an interest from Connecticut DEEP to look at what was going on with the bulkhead and the revetment. There was some back and forth between the assistant town planner, Jim Went, and the people at DEP about what was approved and whether it should have gone to them for an advisory opinion. And their response has been that they felt it should have been brought to the state for an advisory opinion. It was not. It was just approved locally as part of the planning and zoning process.
I'm sorry, what should have been brought to them? Whether or not the bulkhead stays?
Well,
whether
the initial
bulkhead should have been
the initial
approved
bulkhead construction, which was done as kind
prior
of
to Sandy.
an
This is all
emergency
prior to
project
Sandy.
after Irene.
Okay.
It was done under, kind of extraordinary conditions that, an effort had to be made to protect the building.
So this is the reason we're waiting for Joe. It's on his watch, or maybe not his watch. I don't even know whether he was working for the town at the time. Yeah. So, it was before him. So, it's a DEEP issue, and it has to do with, I think we had a brief discussion about this, about whether or not the bulkhead is going to have to be cut down a little bit, 2 feet, 5 feet. I don't know what their recommendations are, but whatever they are,
It's probably premature to wade into that discussion
I agree.
tonight, but it is something that's on their radar that will need to be resolved in some manner.
right, okay. Anything else?
Regarding the parking lot.
Yep.
Two things. So as we got into construction, we had to decide between Shawmut, ourselves, the town, what would be done about the porous pavers and when. Were we trying to salvage them and reinstall them? Did it make sense to take them out now versus taking them out later in the project? We spent some time, the town spent some time doing some test removals on the property of the porous pavers and found that a lot of them are coming out broken, pretty clearly from just being there for, so many years and having normal traffic on them. Even well before heavy equipment was really underway at the project site, even in areas where there has been no heavy equipment. So that kind of raised a concern about, is it practical to try and reinstall them? And given the committee's concern with addressing perceptions of neighborhood flooding and actual concerns about stormwater runoff, the thought was, well, maybe we should keep some of the pavers. So in speaking with the chairman and with Joe Michelangelo and Laura Pooley, we looked at, can we maintain the same project design as far as pitching the parking lot up to the height we want at the building, yet keep some or all of the porous pavers, and then replace the rest of them with drainage elements. So what I did on this plan here was look at keeping the existing porous pavers that are in there right now, right where they are, around the 3 edges of the parking lot, the 2 ends and then the side along Fairfield Beach Road, but removing all of the other pavers and asphalt and repaving them as we had always intended to do. We have essentially the same pitch condition for the parking lot that's in the current design. We have not affected the egress up to the site, or up to the building and up to the beach in front of the building with the handicap ramps, with the delivery lane, transformer access. None of that has changed at all. In keeping the porous pavers, it's in the same spot where we had rain gardens, so we need to pick one or the other. So if we keep the porous pavers, we would not have a rain garden. The thought was that down the center of the parking lot where we currently have these islands of porous pavers, that we would instead go to a drainage element, and there's a couple of ways we could do that. It's basically a long linear strip that would be abutting parking spaces. On page 2 and 3 of the handout, I have 2 possible cross-sections of what that would look like, and this is also, again, the result of discussions and feedback from Public Works and Engineering. So one idea is that we basically put a simple trench drain down the length of the parking lot that water would fall into as it's sheeting towards Fairfield Beach Road, and then get absorbed into a thick bed of crushed stone where it would be able to, where the stone would be able to store the water. Similar to how the existing porous pavers function, right? The porous pavers right now sit on the surface, and there's a thick bed of crushed stone underneath them, so that you create this void area where water can percolate, go down into the stone, and then disperse into the sand. On the second page, I had an alternate idea for creating like a gravel strip, if you will, between parking spaces. So you go from wheel stop to wheel stop with perhaps rounded river rocks that look nice and aren't sharp and aren't going to hurt people, so that as the water sheets from the building towards the strip, it would fall into the gravel and again fall down into the crushed stone below. And so we would essentially build concrete curbs that would have little openings in them to let the water in and water out. So, and these are not final details. This was my first approach at it. I had a meeting today with the chairman and with Joe Michelangelo when he talked about some refinements. On the trench drain detail, Joe was more in favor of having a closed bottom drain that could be cleaned out so that as sand got into it, it could be shoveled out, and then it would then periodically be piped to dry wells underneath it. On the detail with the gravel strip, we talked about possibly can that become some type of planted grass, swale, some small specimen trees or shrubs or grasses or something that gives a little bit of greenery to the middle of the parking lot. At this point, I wanted to come to the committee and just say this is what we're thinking of in response to the concern about the loss of the pavers, and what do you think?
I just want to remind the committee of one part that wasn't included, and that is that the driver here, I was just looking back in our notes from March 10th, the driver here is to try to, if you recall, accommodate the original design at the building, the elevated parking lot, so that it had a tendency to mitigate the height of the building. So the goal here is, the real number one goal is to regrade the parking lot. And I think about the center of the building, the parking lot would be increased in height by 2 feet.
Approximately 1.5 feet.
1.5 feet. So it all counts as far as what you see when you drive up or drive by the building. So the big driver was, no pun intended, was to try to accommodate the higher elevation of the parking lot at the building. And the alternative we looked at was expensive, because I think you had to change the retaining walls and so forth if you dropped the parking lot down.
Yeah, if we had to keep the parking lot right where it is today, we could do it, but we'd have to completely reconfigure the area in front of the building.
Right.
We're starting to get, as construction rolls along, a little more restricted on what we can do. For example, the electrical trench has already been completed, leading to where the transformer is going to go. So
Yep.
we don't have the option to move that at this point.
So comments from the committee?
Do you have room for option 2? For the large?
Well, the way option 2, we don't have room for anything big. The way that works is that we're actually using the space between the front tire and the theoretical end of the parking space, that curb stop area. So you can really only have things that are flush with the pavement there.
But you only have, I mean, there's only the strip to the, I guess, the west, where you have front-to-front parking, correct?
That's true. We do have some leftover room on the strip to the east, only because of the way that the spaces are kind of, they're parallel with one side of the lot, but not the other side of the lot, so you have some leftover space on one side of where the end of the parking is.
So you're saying that you could do the island in the area that says 160 lineal feet of trench drain, and you could do some of the island where it says 200 lineal feet of
That'd be reverse, actually, I think, if I'm understanding correctly.
Well, it won't work here very well, will it?
Well, you're saying you've got an 18-foot parking spot from the center line of the thing.
Right.
A 5-foot trench is probably a little generous. Like, I mean, you're going to have the cars sticking out at the end of it.
Yeah, that was just a function of the fact that where we did have double-loaded spaces,
Yeah.
that was the both wheel stop distances. So where it's single-loaded, we would just do the 2.5 feet, I would say.
Yeah.
And you're right, there'd be locations to the east where we'd have to neck that down to nothing.
Yeah.
But there'd also be locations to the west where we could spread the spaces apart more because there's more leftover room.
Right. I mean, I personally, I'd be fine with either. I mean, I'm not necessarily a fan of having scope creep and having like greenery added into it and everything. I think you could do it, and then if down the road, if the town decides to excavate it out and put greenery in there to have a rain garden, I think that's possible since you have such a large trench provided. I mean, unless I'm sort of mistaken on it, but you've got a deep enough trench in here filled with the crushed stone that I think you'd be fine either way without us having to spend extra money. I mean, aesthetically, I'd love to have vegetated swales in there.
Okay.
So
What would be the cost to do it this way?
So there's two columns of cost. So at the project cost that's routed through Shawmut, we would get some kind of credit back for asphalt square footage that being reduced. We would get probably some add back in for patching of the pavers that are now remaining. So optimistically, let's say that's a wash. We would need to confirm the numbers, but I don't think the adds are more than the deducts.
plus the deducts for the
It's hard to
bioswales.
say.
They haven't had a chance to review this yet, but
We'd have to take a look at it.
on the town side, all right, previously, the Department of Public Works was going to excavate the rain gardens, was going to remove all the asphalt and pavers, was going to bring in and place all of the fill to ramp up the parking lot, was going to do all the striping of the spaces, and install drainage in the rain gardens. So this is still based on them providing some of that work. They would do the excavation, the placement of the stone and the filter fabric, the placement of whatever drain structure we agree on for the center of the spaces. They would still be doing all the filling of the parking lot. They'd still be doing the removal of the asphalt. So Shawmut's subcontractor would still be doing all the paving that they already own.
So, speaking for myself, I've never been a fan of seeing the parking lot elevated. It's on a slight pitch now, and I think the exercise that we saw at the meeting that we had at Town Hall on the sidewalks indicated a couple of different pitches, and it just reconfirmed my belief that having more of a pitch was not a good idea. That being said, I think there are three components. Forgive me, I'm just a little irritated that this committee has voted on two separate occasions, on this whole paver thing, and because it's kind of like you keep going to the doctor, you have something wrong with you, you keep going to the doctor until you find one doctor who gives you the answer that you're looking for, and that's what I feel like this topic has become, because this committee has done on several occasions has gone through this exercise where we've said we want the pavers to remain. So you'll forgive me, I'm just a little irked by the fact that here we go again. So that being said, there were always three components to the paver issue. One was, and first and foremost, was water saturation / water runoff, whatever you want to call that. Number 2 was aesthetics, and number 3 was noise. Okay? I think those can be best accomplished by leaving the pavers where they are. I think it can be best accomplished by leaving the parking lot the way it is. And I think that we're spending a lot of time, a lot of money, and making a lot of trips to the doctor unnecessarily to go through this issue again.
Can I make a comment, Mr. Chairman? I live on Fairfield Beach Road, and every driveway has gravel. And I can tell you one thing, there is more gravel in the roadway than in the driveways. And if you put gravel in there, it's going to wind up in the street. I don't know why we'd want to put anything loose in a driveway with all that traffic coming out.
Well, okay, remember though, this is a strip that's in between where the car is parked. Nobody's going to be driving on it. And we're also talking about big enough rounded rocks. They're not going to get caught up in tire treads.
So they're
When
contained
they
between...
plow the
curbs.
driveway and this, if in this,
Well, there would be curbs there, so presumably Public Works would throw some, temporary, the fluorescent stakes you see on the sides of people's driveways so they know where to plow.
Okay.
Because you wouldn't want them peeling up the curbs
I
every
just don't
winter.
want to see the gravel out in the street because it just makes a nuisance.
Okay.
Other
I
comments?
kind of agree. Weather conditions can make the gravel move. Flooding, water, snow, plows. This is going to be an all year-round place, so I think that has to be taken into consideration. I'm assuming these strips are not going to change the number of parking spaces?
No. I don't have an exact number, but the existing lot has fewer spaces than what this layout provides. This is the same space layout that we have on the current drawings, and we are picking up a number of spaces from what the current lot has. Most, I can't take credit for it. It's mostly because we got rid of the berm, and we have that space in front of the building now. It's just extra room that was available for space layout.
We're not going to decide on this tonight, I assume.
No.
And we could decide on this much later. Under the rare possibility that we have money left over near the end, I suppose we could put pavers back on the table, we could buy them, if the committee wants to.
Yeah, I looked into, under a doomsday scenario that every paver is broken and can't be reused, we can buy the same paver, and even if we had to buy the entire job, I don't think it was more than like $30,000. I don't remember the number exactly, but it was, in the grand scheme of things, it was a manageable sum. I would put it that
It just
way.
depends if we're going to be short or not at the end, it seems to me.
Yeah, I think that's one of the other drivers that isn't being mentioned, and that is that the replacement of the pavers was an alternate ad in the bidding process and not carried forward when we asked for additional funding. So we're also fighting a cost issue here on this. But most importantly, the committee did spend 2 meetings and a lot of time looking at that wall back there and we have drawings that you did for us about what this grade is really all about. And, I think from our commitment to the neighborhood and to the town to mitigate the height of this building as much as possible, whether it be landscaping or whether it be with the way we've arranged the ramps and rails, the retaining walls, the color of the retaining walls, we're doing everything we can to mitigate that height. And if you go down there, it's high.
Yeah, if you go down there right now and you see where the fill has been mounted up under the locker wing,
Right.
it looks high. It's not going to look as high once we raise the parking lot.
So with the reference, the building's going up 3.5 feet, the parking lot's going up 1.5 feet. So the whole thing is not, it mitigates it. It doesn't look quite as bad. So I think that's where we started out. We started out being disappointed that the parking lot was going to be left at its original elevation. Then we talked about the building being 1 foot higher, and we brought the parking lot up even higher. I think it was like 2.5 or 3 feet at the building. And we started talking about grades and whether car doors would slam or whether it'd be a pain in the neck. And also I have to say that at the last project meeting, this was discussed on site, and Jerry Lombardo was there. And I can't speak for him, but he certainly gave me the impression that he was very supportive of reducing the number of pavers because he gets a complaint all the time about high-heeled shoes and tripping hazard and so forth and so on. I mean, it's down on the bottom of the list, but it's there as an issue, as far as the operator is concerned. So the question that, Kevin, I think you'll want to know is what direction do we want to go in? We can certainly table this and give it some time and hear from Joe at our next meeting, because this is a Public Works, a kind of collaboration with Public Works.
Functionally, in either option, has Joe given a preference either way? I mean, other than the vegetation in option 2?
Of these twos, or
the trench
or
versus
the
the-
alternative where we try to vegetate it?
Or, no, I'm saying trench drain or ditch, for lack of better words.
No, actually, Joe's, thank you.
And not to describe, just, easy. One word answers.
Joe seems to be in favor of either option.
Okay.
So I think it's really more committee preference on what direction we should head in.
Certainly the water, one of the things that's driven this discussion is when the utility trenches were dug, you could easily see the amount of crushed stone which is under this parking lot, which is exceptional in depth. I mean, it's 18 inches.
Yeah.
So if you
it's
could get
18
into that
inches.
layer, either through a trench drain, through these islands, or through the pavers, it seems to me that you're set. We don't have to pipe it anywhere. You've
mean-
got sand underneath it.
Do you think you're going to have to put new crushed stone? Do you think you have to excavate down?
I think we can make use of some of it. The islands are not continuous right now, so
Yeah.
the crushed stone kind of stops. It doesn't keep going every place we'd want it to go.
Right.
What I was trying to do is catch as much of the upslope as possible with our new drainage. So, yeah, I would expect we would have to add to the crushed stone that's there.
Yeah.
As the surface water runs down that parking lot, what's the most effective interceptor? The slit, the trench drain, or these islands with the gravel, with the washed stone in them, or?
I think the gravelled strips would probably be better, but I know that we can set up a trench drain that would work as well. But yeah, I think something that's open with a lot of voids in it, like a gravel bed, would probably be
You're curbing it. So what
more
are you-
likely to work.
What are you curbing it with?
They have slits or
There's a
scuppers.
few options. We talked about the town has a concrete curb extruder. So they would do that and then create these little
Down.
V'd openings at every space for the water to weep in.
With all due respect, you guys don't live down there. I do. When there's a heavy storm and that parking lot gets excessive amounts of sand thrown into it, it's going to fill up those drains, and the drains will be useless. After Irene, after Sandy, we had tons of sand in the parking lot. It was very easy for DPW to just scoop it up, sweep it off, and we were back in business. If you put drains in there, it's going to require manual labor to remove the sand from the drains. We're not talking about the parking lot at ShopRite or Stop and Shop or at Town Hall. We're talking about a beach. And the sand goes flying even when there isn't a big storm. And I really don't think you're taking that into consideration. Again, with all due respect, I think you're barking up the wrong tree, and I think you really ought to just lay low on the drains and consider the topography of where you are.
Well, I mean,
That's
to
just
that-
my opinion.
To that point, I think that's probably why Joe is concerned about wanting a closed bottom trench so that they could drive through there with their vacuum truck and in a matter of an hour or two clean the whole thing out. So I don't think he sees it as a maintenance issue.
The closed bottom trench means grates on the top, and do grates on the top mean another shoe issue for these?
The openings will not be as nearly as big as they are now in the porous pavers, but there will still be slits in the top.
Right.
But the other thing to keep in mind is you're talking about a 12-inch wide item that somebody could just step over.
He claims that at night, they don't know where they're walking. There might be
I
other reasons
can't
for
argue with that.
Maybe the Parks and Rec Commission should ban high-heeled shoes down there, and that would solve the problem.
Right.
Maybe I'll go back and be chairman, we'll take care of it.
Could you, or until during this interim between the next meeting, reconvene with Joe and Jerry and give us, and keep this discussion going? Fortunately for us, this is a September, October issue, but we don't want to let it go. We need an option, we need it priced out, we need to know what we're doing.
One last thing. Are you proposing adding any catch basins in this scenario? Is that one catch basin at the entrance, is that new?
No, that's an existing catch basin near the guard shack. There's
Okay.
another existing catch basin at the west end near the Jackie Durrell Pavilion, but closer to the street. I'll be honest with you, I was thinking about that today, that we might want to pop one in the other end near the dumpsters, but
It's on the-
But
on the
even
east side?
even there, it's still kind of at a high point. You know, the
Yeah.
water is still cross-pitched back to the main entrance.
Yeah.
So,
But our ultimate goal would be to contain it on site
Yeah.
as much as.
That's correct.
As much as possible. With the pavers along the road being.
yeah, you know,
being the final
what we're
absorber.
really trying to do is we have this mid-row of pavers that we're trying to replicate with the drainage.
I understand.
The upper row of pavers closest to the building, you get the least bang for the buck out of because the water is
Already
sheeting
going,
from there.
right.
That's
Yeah.
the high point.
Right.
So you only get the benefit of that limited area. It's not like it's picking up
Right.
impervious surface above it.
Do you solve the problem by doing something along the road? A drainage system along the road and not in the middle, not in the islands in the middle? As far as just getting the water down? No, you don't. I know the answer, okay. You don't. You want to get that water into the ground,
You're talking,
contain it and get it into the ground.
you're talking more like,
I'm just saying, forget that, somehow do it down here, but,
I mean,
and then get it all, down slope.
I suppose you probably would have a single point of, this gives you at least some redundancy to catch some of the interim water.
Withdraw the whole.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was trying to keep it so the perimeter rows of pavers were only taking as much sheet flow as they currently are.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, that said, unless any other questions from the committee, we're going to table this issue. We have time, and it needs a little more input from Joe and Jerry and people that are actually going to be there. Kevin, do you have anything else under your agenda line item here?
No, just to emphasize, agenda item number 10, we really need that to be voted on.
Okay. We've had 2 meetings where we haven't had the opportunity to have the committee formally accept the scope and responsibilities of the Finance Subcommittee. I think everybody has that document. It was put together by Steve Pitnello. We've had it in our file for at least a month or so. Finance Subcommittee duties and responsibilities, March 4th, 2016. It's a pretty good document, and it outlines the responsibilities of our Finance Subcommittee as far as going forward with the project. I'd love to have a motion of acceptance. We were close to it at our meeting at Sullivan Hall, but I'm not sure why we didn't get it done, but we didn't. So if there's a motion to accept these, the membership would be David and Rich and Steve and Chuck Warrington of Colliers.
Maybe, Jim,
Yes.
I provided a copy of that to Ben at last Tuesday's meeting, and if asking him to do a review of it. Was there anything that you took exception to in that?
Oh, yeah, actually, Chuck and I actually reviewed this morning, and I think it's a very adequate document.
The duties and responsibilities, the Penfield Building Committee Finance Subcommittee is formed to provide oversight on all project-related invoices and change order requests with the goal of managing the Penfield Pavilion's project's approved budget. With the assistance of Colliers, the Penfield Building Committee Finance Subcommittee will review each invoice and change order request to ensure compliance with the contract requirements and impact on the overall project budget. The the Penfield Building Committee Finance Subcommittee will not approve any invoices or change orders, excluding emergency change orders, but will endeavor to reduce the time it would take, the time that would be dedicated to these reviews, absent the efforts of the subcommittee. And then it goes into the specific areas, invoices, change orders, and so forth. We've had this document. It'd be great to approve it tonight and get it off the table.
Mr. Chairman?
I make a motion. Oh,
Okay,
sorry.
you make the motion, go ahead.
Motion made to approve?
Yes.
Again, my conversation with Chuck, I'm sorry.
I'll second it.
Second, thank you.
Was that I didn't want to recreate the wheel. Steve has a lot of experience doing it, but my comment to Chuck, and he's not here tonight, but his comment to me was, because this has worked at other places, and I wanted to make sure that we were not recreating the wheel, and he said this worked satisfactorily at the last project. Were you on that last project?
Yeah, this is actually a little bit better, in our opinion, than the last couple of subcommittees that were generated in other towns. But this is, in our opinion, very.
We have a copyright, so before it gets circulation.
Well, my only concern was I don't want another redundancy. I mean, we have more people involved with this project, something like that, we've had Colliers, but he seemed to indicate, and I think you're satisfied, Rich, and I know Steve is, in my discussion with him, that this would be an appropriate level of responsibility for us, and it wouldn't be a waste of our time or anyone, the town's time.
And the key for us is the balance of the committee, the 9-member balance of the committee, is to stay out of it. In other words, to have the recommendation come in here and not spend an hour and a half at a regular meeting talking about an invoice.
That's
It'd
the
be
goal.
vetted out. That's, and also Steve passed it over to another chair who reviewed it. Riverfield, who? The Riverfield?
That was my comment to Chuck.
Yeah,
and he
okay.
said, yeah. That's why I asked you. You were involved with the Riverfield project? Okay.
Okay.
He did it even better than that? Chuck never said that when I talked to him. Is it really copyrighted? Maybe we can pay for the project by selling it.
We're going to sell the whole project. There's a motion made and seconded. Any other discussion? Ready for a vote? All in favor? Aye. Against? Abstain? Thank you. I'm going to move, before we go into approval of any outstanding invoices, if it's all right with the committee, I'm just going to go to this review and approval of the testing laboratory services. This is another holdover from the last meeting. Who's presenting that? Is that, Kevin, is that you presenting as purchasing, or can you?
I'll talk about it.
Okay.
Yeah, the purchasing put out a bid package for material testing services, which is a fairly minor scope of services on this project, because a lot of, pretty much all the inspection items our firm is doing as part of our contract. There is some material testing work that needed to be contracted to a laboratory. It was bid out. There was one bidder. It was Special Testing Laboratories of Bethel. I reviewed the scope of what they are provided in their proposal and the prices, and I felt they were consistent with what we typically see. So my recommendation would be to authorize it. I don't know if Corinne wants to add anything.
Yes, I also want to point out that it does expire on the 25th. So the other option would be if you didn't vote it in tonight, perhaps state contract. But I believe this is a good bid. They worked for the town before. So
Thank you. We're all set.
My only comment is, why is this coming up now? Is this something out of left field we never knew we had to do? I mean, we've approved everything, and all of a sudden now we're looking at approving another contract?
It's a budget line item.
It is in the budget.
Yeah,
And
it's
this was
just
bid out
late in getting,
originally?
it's just late in getting
No,
selected.
it was bid out, the bid came in late January,
Yeah, it's just gotten
which really
stuck
was
in the
playing,
system.
for one reason or another, it hasn't been on the
Right.
agenda until now.
That answers the question.
I entertain a motion that this, or did we have one?
No, we don't have a motion.
Entertain a motion that this be approved, that special testing. A what? Is there a motion?
I'd make a motion.
Motion made. Second? Thank you. Any discussion, any further discussion about this? Kevin, you're set with it? This person's going to be providing you with information, right?
Yeah, they're going to be doing the concrete testing, Some soil and asphalt testing, but it's mostly concrete and site work related. Framing, steel, those things our office will be
And
inspecting.
it's within the budget, the approved budget, total project budget?
Yeah, the contract's based on unit prices, but I did a takeoff of how many hours I thought would be involved because I
that's
knew
what's
the job
being used?
fairly well, and I came up with $5,000, which is the budget item.
Okay. Any other discussion or questions? All those in favor? Aye. Rich? Okay. Against? Abstentions? One abstention, thank you.
It's not for a set amount, it's unit price work. So time and materials, basically.
So as far as purchasing is concerned, you're all set?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any, next agenda, do we have any invoices for tonight for approval? I have to take a shot at Novocaine before I go.
Rich, when did your name become TBD? To be determined, I assume.
Oh, that's my new initials.
Okay, who's presenting this? Are you, this coming from Colliers?
Sure, we can do that. The first invoice is invoice 5462 from DeStefano and Chamberlain. This is for Phase 3, part of the contract. They are billing for 9% of their construction phase services, which, in our opinion, is appropriate based on the duration of construction. This is a 10 to 12-month project, and they're billing at 9% per month. Total amount of $10,059. They provided backup as well, if you look through subsequent pages of where they are at with invoices to date and their total scope. The next invoice is from Colliers International. It's invoice 15654. This is in the amount of $6,796. Professional service fees amounts for $6,136 of that, and $660 from reimbursable expenses. Again, this is a monthly accrued set invoice amount. The third invoice is from People's United Bank. This is invoice number 519249. This is in the amount of $150,000. This is builder's risk insurance invoice. This came to us over the past couple of days. And then we have three invoices, 56, 57, and 58. This is from Stanton H. Lesser. This is the attorney hired by the town. His invoices are lengthy, and he did not separate his individual items separately from this project versus other work that he's done for the town. But if you look through the invoices or through the line items in each invoice, we have calculated the totals on the project or the invoice approval cover sheet. Number 56 from January 12th in the amount of $200, number 57 from February 4th in the amount of $400, and number 58 from February 17th in the amount of $400.
Mr. Chairman, I don't think it's unreasonable to ask for a separate invoice to be charged against the project. I believe for us to have to take an invoice and have to pick and choose the line items, I mean, I just think we should send this thing back and have him bill the project directly, unless someone feels differently.
No, I would comment that Steve and I commiserated about these, and that was our opinion as well, that there must be more data provided. We're not even sure that these apply to Penfield.
Great. We can do that. We can contact.
You're talking about invoices 56, 57, and 58?
Correct.
Yeah.
I mean, the items aren't even circled. Yeah. So how do we know what you're looking at?
So when we didn't print this out in color, but when these were presented to us, what basically it was presented in a fashion where If this printed in color, you'd actually see the line item that was highlighted. If you look down on the first invoice, which is number 50, excuse me. Yep, 56. If we look through down this invoice, there is a line item that he identifies the Penfield project.
I also think you ought to check the dating on it. I don't think the dating on the invoice is correct. It's from December 2nd, 15 to January 11, 15. I mean, I think we should at least get an invoice that's properly dated.
And project-specific.
I agree.
Okay, that said, it sounds to me like we're warming up for a motion, but we're going to exclude 56, 57, and 58.
Okay.
It's there, well,
Um,
it's there,
Chairman?
400. Yes?
I would just say that any copies of invoices that we've taken a look at, I've taken a look at, Colliers puts their stamp and signs it, and that's, I think, an important condition that we want to see maintained.
Right.
Yeah, we can certainly accommodate that.
That said,
Mr. Chairman?
yes.
Can I just make one observation?
Yes.
Just, everybody keep in mind that this does not include Shawmut's first requisition.
Correct.
I guess that's still an outstanding item.
Correct, I'm going to
I
get
just
to that next.
want you to
I'm
keep
gonna
that on your radar.
Inquire about that. No, we don't see anything, any construction costs here.
Right.
So this is a summary sheet is prepared by Colliers, and the request, my request from the committee would be a motion regarding approval, and a second, and we can proceed. You can make the motion conditional as far as the first three items are concerned. You made your motion?
I'll make the motion.
There's a motion?
I'll second it.
Seconded. And the motion made and seconded is for invoice 5462, 15654, and 519249, respectively to Stefano and Chamberlain, Colliers, and People's United, which is the insurance. And
So who made the motion? I'd like to.
David made the
Dave
motion,
seconded by Rich.
seconded by Rich.
Any discussion? Any further discussion? Thank you for the summary, by the way. This is a good way to look at this. Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Abstain, against? Thank you.
Just a matter of protocol, is your intention we would sign this front of this document? It has our name on it, and the assumption is we're going to sign it. And I would like, if we're going to sign it, that we get a new document that I can properly sign.
Yeah, how do you want to handle this? I mean, ordinarily, these committees just make a vote, and you could put the vote on your,
Yeah, this is a standard template. Of course, in a formal building committee meeting like this, you don't have to. There are building committees that like to have a signature, so if it's a decision to just wipe the bottom half of this away, we can certainly do that.
yeah.
It's your pleasure, whether, again, it looks like the intention is to sign, and I just feel uncomfortable signing the document.
I
think we
agree,
feel the
and
same way.
I think we have typically, I could almost say over the years, acted as a committee, and so in place of this signature box, you should have the motion, you should have the meeting data as far as the approval and the votes. In this case, unanimous, voted as an agenda item at this meeting unanimously. We have voted. I'm going to dispense with this line item.
Okay, if I can just answer Rich quickly here. Would you like the stamp on the front cover page? Because if you flip through, Chuck did stamp some of these invoices, but if you want to see the stamp on the cover sheet, we can do that too.
That'd be the way to do it.
Yeah, do both.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that said, is there anything else that come before the committee for approval as far as invoices are concerned? How are we doing with our construction invoice? We ready to go 2 weeks, or you need
We
before
were
then?
actually ready to go with it today, but we were called this afternoon, informed that it was not going to be submitted for approval.
Where is it hung up?
So it got hung up with us primarily because the requisition came to us a couple of weeks later than the contractual date, and when we received it, we actually met with Shawmut. We wanted to see further breakdown in the schedule of values and in the requisition values, so that we could understand what we were basing our values against. And just a broad, and they agreed to most of the line item breakdowns. So once they do that, and we could sit down with them and go through it again, I don't anticipate it shouldn't take longer than a couple of days. It should be presented at the next meeting.
It was supposed to be presented tonight. Again, we weren't informed until late this afternoon that it was not. We had it reviewed by both offices, your office and DeStefano and Chamberlain, for the work that's been in place. You both agreed that the work was in place. The work is going on. We would like to get the subcontractors paid. And again, the notice came to us late this afternoon that it was going to be submitted to the committee for
What's
approval.
the value?
It's, I don't want to say off the top, it's,
338,000?
yeah.
Right around.
It's,
335, 313.
what is it?
335, 313, 61.
We have some options here. We can deputize the subcommittee to review this. We can have a special meeting. I think it's I don't think, given the amount of work and the momentum that's on the project, I'm hesitant about hanging up payment. Rich, do you have,
I say deputize it. Let the subcommittee have.
For this one particular invoice, I don't like the habit of it. Rich, you comfortable with that?
Yes.
Yeah. David?
Unless this doesn't become the precedent.
Yeah. All right, it was specifically stating this will not become a precedent, is the, I'd entertain a motion that the Finance Subcommittee be deputized to approve this particular invoice before the next meeting, as quickly as possible, so we get money in the system. Is that all right with you? That works?
We're comfortable with whatever the subcommittee would like to do. I mean, we've been in communication with the subcommittee, and whatever they would like to do, we're 100% comfortable with.
Okay.
I'll make that motion.
Motion's been made that the construction requisition go before the be given to the subcommittee, and they should review it and approve it conditionally or as for the complete amount.
No one has seconded it yet.
Second, Rich?
David seconded it.
You have a second.
Okay, you got a second? Got made a second? Any discussion?
Just that in future, there should be at least a week time that we, as a subcommittee, have the opportunity to review it after Collins has done
Right.
their review. Colliers, I mean.
Right.
That doesn't fit, though, does it? You can't do, what are you leaving for your total turnaround, 2 weeks?
We don't need very long for our turnaround. You know, I don't want to rehash anything, but the biggest problem here is we got it late. We wanted some additional breakdowns. The first construction requisition, we didn't feel there was enough detail in there. We shared it with the subcommittee, and we just didn't get the detail back from
Okay.
Shawmut yet.
So everybody's learned a lesson, and we're
We
gonna
just
make it
need
better.
a day,
We're
2 days.
starting off,
Is
yeah.
basically
Okay.
what we need.
All right, it's been made and seconded to proceed without precedent, without setting a precedent on this, with turning it over to the subcommittee.
Will it be necessary to have a special meeting for that?
No, it's delegated. It's going to be delegated,
Just-
and then your point should be, as a member of the special committee, that it come to a vote at the next meeting, to confirmation.
Okay.
And I don't think that's a problem. Comfortable with that? I think we have a great team, and I think we ought to rely on them. All in favor of the motion? Carried unanimously, thank you. Are there any other issues as far as payment is concerned? Any public comment? Yes. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good.
Drew Georgiadis, District 9. I serve on the RTM for the town of Fairfield. Anecdotally, I have not been having, I live 3 blocks from the site, and anecdotally, I have not been having any kind of rattling or anything, even though I'm very aware of the pile driver. More specifically, I'd like to discuss the permeable pavers. I agree with Mr. Bass. Being a resident, there is concern about the gravel going into the road. There's also concern that the pavers were installed after Irene for the residents of the beach area in the hopes that they would slow the water down, that the water would permeate, and that the water would not impact the neighborhood to the extent that it did with Irene. A concern of high heels for people who rent the unit, are aware that there are permeable pavers when they rent the unit, is not a concern to the people that live in the beach area or the people that use the property during the day for the beach. So the town went to great expense to remove the asphalt, to install those permeable pavers, and there was a reason they did that. And I don't think high heels should be a concern in eliminating that if it is there for a functional reason. So that said, my last comment is on the gravel. Groundwater is a huge issue in the beach area, and I have French drains, which are absolutely useless when the groundwater is completely saturated and up to your front steps. So you can think that the gravel is under the permeable pavers, but when the water is 2 inches above, the gravel is, rendered useless. So keep those in mind. Again, Mr. Bass is correct. It's a very unique situation, and the groundwater, as I see in my basement, it's there. So I don't know if that negates any kinds of advantage that gravel could offer, but please keep that in mind when you are considering the products that you're using. Thank you.
Too bad there isn't a way we can weave the high heel issue into the current presidential debates.
Come out on Saturday. It's for Chief Terry McNamara is walking a mile in your shoes.
Is that right?
Saturday the 30th.
Okay. Any other comments? Good evening.
So I'm Dick Mahusky. I live on Colonial Drive. My comments are with respect to what we've been calling the Horse Hill. I see from one of Kevin's site reports that the rubble has been put at the easternmost end of the timber bulkhead at the Horse Hill. And I also note that there was a letter sent to this committee by the Flood and Erosion Control Board commenting on the importance of that section as a mitigation measure for the neighborhood flooding. And the simple version is that that Horse Hill area will be equal to the 12-foot elevation top of the bulkhead, going back to the original plan. What I also would mention that I sent a letter on March 8th to the committee asking for more detail about the cover, because if you look at the construction drawings, it shows the rubble up to an elevation of 10 feet and then 2 feet of cover. As of now, my belief is that the only cover is the beach sand that is in the area and maybe some of the fill that was brought in for under the locker wing. And I would observe that that is not going to be any kind of meaningful resistance to storm waves, storm action, the force of storm. It's just going to take normal beach sand and swoop it right down into the parking lot, right out onto Fairfield Beach Road. Typically, in talking about dike structures, you want some impermeable core. And my concern is how high will that impermeable core go? So I would encourage the board to either, Kevin can take this offline with the Flood and Erosion Control Board. That would certainly work. But the point is the Flood and Erosion Control Board is still very concerned about the detail there, because the detail will make a difference when there is a storm.
I thought we had another issue too, and that is the connection to that property. Wasn't there a, isn't there approval required by conservation?
That's a subject that I believe is a discussion topic and all the players are not here now.
Well,
In my letter of March 8th, I suggested that there is 12-foot elevation land on the Penfield site. One does not have to go onto the Rickard Beach Conservation Controlled Area to get to 12 feet.
Yes, Kevin.
Yeah, so on those two issues, there is contour 12 onto the Penfield site. The sand does meet it now. We haven't gotten an as-built survey of it yet, but it looks like it's flush out at elevation 12. The reason why we couldn't go on to the other property without a conservation approval is not for the little bit of grading, it's for the excavation to place all the boulders. So we didn't really have the luxury of stopping the construction sequence to do that ahead of time. So it's something that we've left on the table that we can go back to conservation and extend that area into the open space. It doesn't necessarily have to be done by this contractor at this time. It could be done at any time. As far as the 2 feet of cover, that was more of a practical concern we had about keeping that beach access smooth, safe, and accessible for both vehicles and people, barefoot people. It's kind of difficult to transition from sand to boulders to sand again without building something that's got the profile of like a sidewalk, like you might have on the South Benson Marina, where you go out into the water with a sidewalk on top of it. And I was also concerned about sand blowing, onto it and off of it and creating a tripping hazard. So that's why we left 2 feet of cover. If you ask DEP, they'd want even even more cover.
Oh, I'm not objecting to the cover. I'm just questioning the composition of the cover. A potential model is over on Jennings Beach, next to the pavilion there, where the roadway, if you will, goes over the dune. That seems to be pretty hard, compacted soil that's looks tougher than sand over time. But I just wanted to get that on the record, and I think the Flood and Erosion Control Board is also going to be very interested in the next meeting talking about this bulkhead question.
Okay, yeah, fine. Will you, we need to bring this back as an agenda item, just to make sure that the committee understands it. I don't want to do it at 20 minutes to 8, but, and particularly, are we attempting to pick up elevation 11 or 12 on the Rickard Beach property?
Well, the finished grade already has. We've done that. The area's been backfilled with sand.
12.
12?
Don't say 11.
I interchange 11 and 12.
Yeah, for any of you who've been to the site
Makes it
lately,
easier.
if you look at the beach, you'll see the sand is graded up to the top of the bulkhead, which is just below 12. It will further be contoured up to 12. The sand, again, the core of boulders could not go that far because of the overdig and the
So the
disturbance.
only conservation issue is getting the core of boulders in there.
Yeah, of course, I guess at that point, we have to ask ourselves, how far do you want to go?
Yeah,
Where do
right,
we
you
draw
can
the
go all way
line?
across the beach.
Is it worth adding another 10 feet at this point, or does that mean we should go all the way across Rickards Beach? And I don't know the answer to that.
We'll leave it as an open item and work with you on it. Any other questions from the public? Any other new business or old business from the committee? Hearing none? Did I just hear, Hillary, was that a motion to adjourn? Yes, it was. Made and seconded, thank you. We are adjourned, thank you.
That means before 2 weeks are out, you're off the house.
It was all approved. It was all because of that.
In my mind, it's not a reason to hold up.